Sup y'all, today we're going to try and take these engines and these parts and try and make one functional Dorito for our Mazda RX8 race car. Let's see how it goes. Welcome back everybody. My name's Andrew, this is the Make It and Break It YouTube channel, and behind me is my Project Doritos Locos 2004 Mazda RX8 race car, rally car, seat time build. Last few episodes we've been pulling the engine out. You can see because there is nothing in here. Because we cooked a couple apex seals on our last track day and we need to swap a new motor in. So we got a new motor from JDM of California and they imported it from Japan, and supposedly before it was pulled it compression tested fine. So hopefully it keeps us alive for at least a little bit. Even if we don't make the track day that's 2 days from now. I don't think we'll make that, but we'll see how it goes. So, here's where we stand right now. So this beautiful engine, it actually looks pretty good from the outside, is the old engine we pulled out of that area. This was I think it was a rebuilt engine. It's at least the second engine on this car. And I think it was just sitting too long. We bought this car and it only got like 1,000 or 3,000, maybe 2,000 miles, something like that. Like 1,000 to 3,000 miles in a year, which means it was sitting dry. And then when we started driving it really hard, the apex seals ate themselves and possibly our rotor housings and other things. Also, when we drained the oil, we saw some bronze metal particulates, which may mean our bearings are going bad in this thing. So we're basically bought into a full rebuild onto this engine. Which brings us to this. This is our replacement JDM 6-port engine and transmission set. So we have a spare transmission if we need to. And we need to get this into there. So first, we need to do some things to this to get it ready. That means we got to pull the transmission. Right now, I'm not planning on using this transmission because I don't think that transmission actually has a bad fourth gear synchro. So what was happening is we'd go from, first, second, third, and the third to fourth shift, you would grind if you didn't let it sink in. So that's kind of what synchros are there for in this gearbox. But it's only the third to fourth shift. And it's not the 5 to 4 shift. 5 to 4 goes just fine, which is interesting, let's say. So I'm thinking it's not the transmission, or I'm hoping it's not the transmission. I have a spare one, obviously. But when we were down here, the motor mounts, let me get those real second. When we looked in here after our track day, we found that the motor mounts, and these are the old ones, one of them, I think it was the passenger side here, was collapsed such that the hard motor mounts that go on this engine were resting on it. And that means that essentially it wasn't doing anything, and there's a lot more play in the engine transmission combination because there's no transition mount or no transmission mount. So if there's any play in the engine mount, it runs itself right through the drive line in the transmission, which makes some shifts harder. So my thinking is that it's actually an engine mount problem, not a transmission problem. And it's not that hard to pull this transmission if it ends up being a transmission problem. So the plan is pull this transmission off, which means we gotta do some wiring and stuff like that. And then just pull some wiring and then pull these bolts and slide it off and then get that back into our storage area back out that way. And then bring in some pieces off this old engine that I know work and put it onto this new one. So you can see stuff like this has a bunch of just crap all over it. The intake stuff is probably fine, but I know that my intake stuff works pretty well. So I'm probably going to just swap my whole upper intake in. And that'll keep all of the vac lines and everything that are attached here that I know work well. as well as our solenoids, which we just fixed, like all of them, and replaced some of the ones even we didn't need to replace. So we're going to swap our upper intake manifold over. We also need to figure out, you can see where they removed this. These are just hoses. These are like coolant hoses that we removed and left in the engine bay. But there's some oil hoses on the other side that we might have to go pull banjo bolts and pull off the front of this engine. So we got to figure that out too. And then I'm not sure about these fuel injectors, to be honest. So I'm probably going to pull, I know these fuel injectors are working okay. So I'm going to probably pull the fuel rails and fuel injectors off this motor and put them over here, and then keep these as spares in case I need them. Finally, we have a bunch of brand new parts. As I keep tripping over the lift and I knock all my shit over. That's great. Hold on. Okay, so here's brand new parts, upgrade parts that we're going to throw in there. And these will stay, we'll basically take these parts, I think for the most part, except for those, and switch them between whatever engine transmission combination we end up using here. So here is an upgraded starter. I'm pretty sure the old starter we have is an old non-upgraded starter. So this one will spin faster, give us better startups, that sort of thing. As I come down here, we have some new motor mounts. These are RX8 Performance motor mounts. They're going to be probably better all around than the stock motor mounts. So they have these polyurethane instead of the standard rubber. So it should be stiffer, but still give us pretty good noise and vibration resistance, because we could be doing this sort of thing on some pretty rough roads if we take this thing actual rallying. So we don't necessarily want super stiff motor mounts, because that'll just take a lot of vibrations to and from the motor that we wouldn't mind isolating a little bit. Below it is a whole gasket kit for essentially all the externals of the motor from Mazda trips. So they sell really cool gasket and seal kits and everything. So this helps you, this is basically everything that isn't internally sealed to the motor. So this isn't like your apex seals or your corner seals or any of that sort of stuff. This is just like intake gaskets, exhaust gaskets, O-rings, that sort of thing. So I wasn't sure how many parts we'd have to pull off and what we'd have to pull off, so I bought a whole kit from them. New K&N air filter. You saw when we pulled the old one off, it was super oily and messy. We've got a new K&N that'll be just so much better. That's washable, reusable. We got in this bag, there's some spark plugs. So we got a whole brand new set of spark plugs. Starting off a new motor, you might as well have new spark plugs. I don't necessarily trust those, and I know these ones are cooked. So new set of spark plugs. And then kind of our biggest upgrade is right here. So these 4 boxes and these ignition coil, lead, whatever they are. So this is a Black Halo Racing ignition coil upgrade. One of the things about rotaries is you need a really strong ignition and fuel system because they're firing so much faster than like a standard piston engine. So you're firing twice as fast and using twice as much fuel at the same RPMs as your standard piston engine of the same displacement, which means you need some really heavy-duty ignition system. So if you remember our last track day, what we had was we had some misfires coming on, and I think that was because our ignition system wasn't handling the heat very well. Might also have been some problems with our apex seals at that point. So this is Black Halo Racing ignition coil upgrades. They're plug and play, essentially. And they're pretty much one of the most popular setups for this car if you're going to upgrade the ignition system, something better. So we have these that we'll go through on here at some point. We'll pull the old ignition system. Oh, and you can see I have like a spare computer here and a whole spare wiring harness. As much as possible, I'm going to pull this wiring harness because I know it works. And that way, if something goes wrong, it's because I did it and I'll know where to start looking. If something's wrong with this one, and I have a full PCM and wiring harness and everything, I won't necessarily know what's going wrong, and it would take me a lot longer to go troubleshoot it. So we'll go pull all the wiring harness off as much as we can, hopefully. All right, so that's the plan. Let's get to it. All right, engine deconstruction check-in. Also, I have given myself a unibrow. I should really stop wiping my forehead with my gloves. Anyway, we have now deconstructed our old engine, which is here. We ended up pulling off the intake, so we got the upper and lower plastic intake. We're not going to pull off the metal intake right now. That one seems to look fine, and I think we're going to be okay there. Worst case scenario, we also swap in some of the parts. You can see some vacuum lines. Anyway, nobody cares about that right now. Pulled this apart. There were some interesting choices made, I think, in some of the routings, but everything seemed to be in pretty decent condition. Pulled off all of our injectors, so I think you got primary and secondaries there. Those look like they're in pretty decent condition, actually. They're super dirty, but their condition actually looks pretty good. Just noticed I forgot to pull that hose off. I gotta pull that hose off. That goes to the heater core or something. In order to get some of the wiring out, the way this wiring is run, the way this harness is run, you actually have to pull the alternator. So we ended up pulling the alternator, and I'm debating, since I have to pull that alternator, I know this one works, so I'll probably put this one back on over there, because that'll work just fine, and we're using all the belts and stuff that we pulled off over there. I am noticing some slight variations in setup here already, so if you go take a look at this, so our oil filler cap is off over here somewhere, but go take a look at this oil filler. It has this vacuum, essentially, line that runs off into the intake here, which is, I think, right above where the fuel gets injected, give or take. Yeah. Whereas over on our old engine, that vacuum line was eliminated, and we were running one off of the intake. I think it's off the bottom of the intake somewhere. So we'll see what we want to do when we start putting our intake back on, because I do want to keep that oil filler in there right now, because I saw on the top of our oil filler cap here on our old one, there was some white residue that I saw, which I think is a bad sign. So I don't really want to put anything from our oil system on this old engine into the new one. So we're just going to leave the oil system installed on that one. So we might have to get a little creative with that vacuum line there, but I think we'll make it work. Next up, we're going to vacuum all this stuff out real quick. That'll clean up most of the dust so nothing falls into our intake off of that thing, as well as some of the crap over here. I'm pretty sure at one point, before I owned it, a small rodent had taken refuge in some of this engine compartment. I pulled out a little bit of material, there it is, that had been piled up in our intake area, as well as I see some droppings on other stuff that make me think something was living here. So I'm going to vacuum all that stuff out before I go put it in storage, and I'll clean up all that stuff in the meantime. So then we'll essentially get that block in the same condition as this one, and I'm not going to film that because it's essentially the same stuff I was just doing, except with that engine, and then we'll start putting on our new parts, and then we can separate the transmission and stuff in a bit. So that's the plan. Let's get to it. Okay, everybody, we're partially through removing some of the parts off here. We still got a couple things to go remove. Our oil cooler lines, which are on this side over here. That'd be that banjo bolt, and then there's the one up front that's kind of coming up that way. Those are still on there. Our coil packs are still on there. And then the old AC compressor, which is right down here, is still on there right now. So we're going to pull those off real quick. But I wanted to talk through something here and see what you all think, because I doubt I'll get everything reinstalled before I get some comments on this video. But my thinking here is I'm looking at this engine harness and comparing it to my old one, which is sitting up over there right now. And I'm kind of thinking that this one actually looks like it's in better condition than mine. So, or than my old one. So, what I'm kind of thinking is I'm going to minimize the amount of stuff I actually have to pull off. I've got to pull off, there's a coolant line over here and then one over there. And then I got to put, got to replace one coolant line for the intake, which I have. And that's about it. And I'm going to try and keep the rest of the engine harness installed right now as it is. That could come back to bite me. There could be something way down in the middle of the harness that really screws me. And I can't do a whole lot about that other than replace it with my harness. But I really need to get this car out of the garage. Even if we're not going to make the track day with it. But I do need to get it running and out of the garage so that I can bring other stuff in here and either pull the motor on a 300 or actually I got a friend's car that they want me to work on. So it'll be one of those replacements. But I need the garage for that. So this will get me up and running quicker. I could have most of my pieces reinstalled in a few hours here. And then possibly have the engine in Saturday, as it's kind of sitting right now. So in a few days, once I go do my track day and everything else, I could have the engine back in a lot quicker than if I'm having to rewire and reset everything, because that just takes me a long time because I'm not super familiar with this platform. So that's kind of my thinking right now. I did harvest. You'll see that's kind of what a bare engine block looks like. It's not even bare because there's still, a bunch of ignition and air valves and the intake on that side and the oil fill section. All that stuff's still there, but that's a lot less going on because I harvested a lot more out of it. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. I'm going to go towards that. I can't put it all back together anyway because if you see that hose that's kind of sticking up off here, I couldn't actually get it off of the fitting. I don't know what's going on there, but that hose is supposed to go right down here where it's cut. So I have a new hose coming in. That'll come in a couple days. But if that's the case, then I have a little bit of time to take my time and go through some of this. So that's kind of my thoughts right now. If you see something glaringly wrong about this whole plan, do let me know because I will be checking the comments on this video. But it looks, pretty much everything looks to be in good condition right now. And I can get to most of the sensors. Most of the sensors I'd be concerned about are sensors that are on the exterior that I could get to anyway. So I'm not super worried if those sensors are bad. And since the harness looks to be in such good condition, I think I'm just going to try it out and send it as is. And if it's terrible, horrible, we can always go in and pull it back out or pull parts of it out that we need to and replace those sections. Check back in once we're done for the evening, I guess. Catch you all then. How do I get so dirty? What is going on? Anyway, we've completed our teardowns, basically of both engines as far as we're going to take them tonight. There's a couple things we're going to pull later, but we're going to move them around first, and I want to keep them on there just for protection's sake. So, here's where we stand right now. So this is our old motor. You can see there's not nearly as much going on as over there. So most of the intake system is off. The oil cooler lines, front and rear, are off. Pretty much all the belts, everything, the entire wiring harness, the fuel injectors, everything but like the ignition system is off. And I'll leave the ignition system on for now. I'll go harvest it later. I'm not really concerned about that right now. And all that stuff is mostly sitting over here. So you can see our intake system. Those are all of our new parts. We're kind of keeping those together. What the heck is going on here? You got like vacuum hoses and vacuum solenoids. All of our parts, our old starter, which still works, so we might keep it or sell it. Doesn't really matter to me. Some of our fuel lines, part of our wiring harness. This is like the main engine sensor package, which looks to be in decent condition. Not as good a condition as that one, which is why we're keeping it, but it looks to be in decent condition, certainly salvageable. We'll keep it around so that we can have essentially 2 engines up and running whenever we want to. You got your solid mounts. Those are like the mount wings for the engines that go on top of those motor mounts that are in that box, or like those old ones over here. One thing we did notice though, if we go look at this, is like our main power harness. So there's your battery connections up there. This is your connection down to your starter, right? This is your main ground onto the engine chassis. One thing we noticed is, so this harness has a couple things that go into the main power fuse box in the engine compartment. Has a couple of these things, which are ground powers or whatever, and then this connector, this white connector. This white connector is missing on the old engine harness. I'll show you. So we're on the left side of the engine here, and this is that same connection set. You notice this connector has been cut off. Maybe. Focus. There. While these two are still there. So this one's actually not that hard to pull. It's just got this is like the main power, like the mainline power. So this would be like your arteries for power. So it's got the one connection up here on your alternator that's real easy to pull. And then it's got the ground connection that's right down here. And then the starter connection, which we have to pull anyway because we have a new starter. So that's not too bad. Everything else seems to be in pretty decent condition though. And this is kind of how we're going to sit it. So I put the oil, I'm going to leave that oil fill system there for now. It's going to have to come back off when we go pull the banjo bolts for the oil feed and returns, because I left those on because we're going to have to move stuff around, but I want to leave the oil system covered because that's one place where we really can't afford to get a bunch of crap in. And I mean, we're in a wood garage, stuff just falls. I'm not too worried about the intakes right now. I'll put like a little towel over them to stop like inadvertent little dust going in, but I didn't want the oil system uncovered too much. And that's it. So this ended up being more of an engine teardown and harvesting video. Not as much new parts going in, but next video definitely new parts are going on, and we're prepping to throw this thing back in once we get the engine separated from the transmission. So yeah, took a little bit longer, but I now kind of know where all the sensors are around and all the connections and stuff, so that's kind of cool. So that's it for this episode of our Doritos Locos RX8 Race Car build. Yeah, the engine's not in, obviously, so I don't have all tomorrow to get prepped for the track, so we're going to leave this for a few days and go work on my daily driver, which is moderately suited to track work, I would say. So we're going to go get that prepped, and then we'll come back to this and finish our engine install and start working on the build proper. So thanks for watching, everyone. My name's Andrew. This is the Make It and Break It YouTube channel. If you like this video, hit like. Comment down below. Obviously, any input, things I could have done better, things to watch out for on import engines. I'm not entirely certain if there's anything particular. Everything looks to be in pretty decent condition, at least compared to the engine I pulled. So, all that sort of stuff. If you have anything you want to tell me, throw it in the comments down below. If you like what we're doing in this channel, we got our RX8 build, got our Hyper 10 Ray build, which is behind the camera over there. We work on our daily driver. We got a Project Ute that I want to throw into a fire or drive off a cliff somewhere. Lots of stuff. Some 3D printing and some technology and design stuff as well. So if any of that sounds interesting, check it out. Definitely subscribe. Click that bell icon so that you get notified when we put out a new video. And yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Again, my name's Andrew, and we've we've been definitely getting out of our comfort zone a little bit. This is my first engine pull ever, so I'm living by my motto here, our channel motto. Things get rough, things go sideways, and when that happens, you don't want to make it hard, just make it up. So we'll catch you guys later.